we do have a copy of this webinar, which will be uploaded after this session, so you can refer back to it if the connection fails. There's also the PDF slides on the USB. Hopefully you've received that by now, but it's also located on our learning management system, which Ken, I might get you to click over to the next slide. So our learning management system is called Moodle, which is just a platform that houses all of the relevant resources and materials for this training course. It's also got the quizzes on there and all the assessment materials as well. So if you haven't got your login details for the Moodle course, please do get in touch with me as soon as you can, because it is incredibly relevant for completing this course, and it's where all of our information is. So I will try and give you a little sneak preview of what that looks like in case you haven't seen it so far, but at the end of the session, but we'll see how we go for time. And you may have noticed behind me, what I'm sitting in is there's lots of beautiful, colourful prizes behind me. And the reason is because we do try and get lots of engagement, lots of participation with everyone involved in today's session. So for anyone that asks a good question, or perhaps Ken asks a question and you're the first to pop in an answer, or perhaps the best answer that we get, we'll hand out prizes. And what we'll do is once all the coursework has completed, we'll send you over your certificate, and we'll also send you any of those prizes which you win in the modules that we'll be running over the next couple of weeks. So plenty of opportunities to win prizes. We like to see them a fully stocked prize pit here at Safe Systems Solutions. So we've got plenty to give away. Ken, over to you.
Good on you, Max. Thank you. Just another one there on the this part. So a lot of Transport for New South Wales people have some firewall things that block the chat function. So if you can't see the chat function for some reason, just use the Q&A. Max will monitor both. Our preference is the chat function. And if you really want to speak, suggest you pop your hand up and then Max will be able to find you and you can speak there. Thanks, Max. And so Max will be behind the scenes answering lots of questions. Max is a very experienced safe system assessor and does quite a few safe system assessments on varied projects. So he'll be able to knock off a few of the answers immediately to everybody, and some will be fed through to me as we go. And my name's Ken Beer. I'm the Principal Engineer at Safe System Solutions. There's my contact details there. So please, if you've got any questions about the content, you can contact myself as well. You can obviously contact Max. Pop my QR code to my LinkedIn there. If you're on LinkedIn, it'd be great to connect. That way we can continue the road safety conversation. I use that as a good platform to continually get information out there about different bits and pieces in road safety. So feel free to connect. I'd love to continue the conversation with you. That'll be down the bottom left corner for the slides, so you can use your phone and use the QR code as you go. One other little way to try to keep you engaged, and some of you know Wally the Wombat. You've met Wally before, but Wally the Wombat is a warning sign, as you'll see, Wally the Wombat warning sign. And Wally appears a number of times during each session, a random number of times. And your job is to count the number of times you see Wally the Wombat and submit that as one of the answers in the quizzes at the end of each module. So you have the quizzes or tests to check you understood the content, and one of the questions is, how many times did Wally appear? This is not one of the Wallies, so your Wally count is 0 at the moment, but that's what it'll look like somewhere on one of the slides. You do get a tiny bit of tolerance either side if we're reaching for your coffee or something and missed a Wally. But do keep an eye out for Wally the Wombats. Okay, successful completion of this course. We do have a benchmark of competency for this course, and so we've got some mandatory requirements. So you have to attend 4 out of the 5 live webinars, and we want you interacting. We'd love to, we want you asking questions and answering questions, and you've got to view that one you miss if you miss one. If for some reason it's just unavoidable that you have to miss another one, get in contact with Max and have a chat about that. You need to complete all the set tasks, quizzes, exercises, assignments. We've got a report and site visit for you. And you have to achieve an 80% pass mark on anything that is marked. So the quizzes and the assignments. So that's a pretty high benchmark, and we don't shy away from that. We want to ensure a level of competency here, and we have some different government agencies across Australia and New Zealand which want a sort of some assurance that people have a level of competency and understanding about safe system assessments as they go out of this. So that's the pass mark. But don't get too freaked out by that. If you're thinking, oh my God, I'm not sure we are here to ensure that you get up to that competency level. So if you have a go at things and you don't do so well, it's worth getting in contact with Max or myself, organising a one-on-one coaching session. We can have a Zoom catch up. We can have a phone catch up. We can point you at different things if you've just got particular concerns that you can have a look at. If you fail this course, we fail the course as well, because our job is to ensure you're at that level of competency. So let's work on this together and really build up that competency level. I'll just contextualize safe system assessments very briefly while you have the opportunity to type in any questions about the running of the course, the content, what we're doing, and then I'll jump into some actual content to start. But I'm sure many of you, if not all of you, have heard of road safety audits. And road safety audits have been around for about 30 years and are an integral part of most infrastructure projects. And they continue to be, and they will continue to be in the future. They're wonderful. Design reviews are also an integral part of any infrastructure project. You need somebody to do that review of your design, check different, have you met design standards? Are there any different bits and pieces? There's an overlap between audits and design reviews, but there's lots of stuff in audits that are outside of what you pick up in the design review. You see, a safe system assessment sort of overlaps both of those a bit. There's a fair bit of what a road safety auditor would do in a safe system assessment. There's lots of stuff outside that. There's a bit of design review type thinking as well. And there's stuff that sit outside both of those. There's a thing called safety and design. That's thought about by a lot of jurisdictions. That's associated with the ability to construct whatever's being planned safely, to maintain it safely, to decommission it safely, and to operate it safely. So there is a bit of overlap again with a lot of these, but there's stuff in safety and design that's not considered in safe system assessments or safety audits. And one there, DDA compliance, or the Disability Discrimination Act. That's may be termed different things in your jurisdiction, but it's simply the legislation that sort of mandates that if we're building public infrastructure or infrastructure that will be used by the public, it needs to be accessible to everybody in the public. So it has to have the ability for people in wheelchairs or vision impaired to be able to use the facility safely. There's a bit of overlap in a few of these, but again, that's a different beast in its own right. So there's lots of these sort of independent assessments within transport infrastructure projects associated with sort of safety in general. There's also the occupational health and safety checks as well. So there's lots of stuff. I just wanted to contextualize that straight off the bat before we jump into some further work. Right, I'm seeing a hand up there, Max. Is that an accidental hand up, do you think, or somebody wants to ask a question?
I'll just get in. Oh, no, there we go. So we've got a question. Is the DDA federal legislation or does it vary state to state?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not a DDA expert. I understand it's state by state legislation, but somebody will no doubt I think there's some Australian standards for DDA stuff. So it'll be that, but I think each state has their own specific legislation. But somebody in the group no doubt is a far more experienced DDA type person than I am and will be able to answer that. So yeah, if you're going to ask a question, you don't need to pop the hand up. You can just type it in there. Only pop the hand up if you want to be unmuted and actually speak and delve into something. Okay, what do you reckon, Max? Dive into it?
Let's get started. Let's get cracking, Ken.
Okay. So what we're going to try and do by the end of this module is understand and list the principles and the elements or pillars, some people call them, of the SAFE system, determine kinetic energy thresholds of different crash types, explain the differences between sort of traditional approaches to road safety and the SAFE system approach. We can look at best practice in behavioural change and vehicle safety interventions, and give some reasons why speed is such a critical aspect of the SAFE system. So now here is a Wally. So that's as much help as I'm going to give you. You are at your Wally count of 1. Okay. The SAFE system as a concept, as a philosophy, has been adopted by every jurisdiction in Australia, and New Zealand's adopted it as well. It's there. We've all signed up to it. It's been signed up to at a federal level, been signed up to it at state levels, and many local governments have signed up to it or just sort of operate under the state guidance. But you'll see the strategies of all the states are underpinned by the SAFE system. There's no debate as to whether we're committed to the SAFE system in documents. The question is, how do we actually operationalize the SAFE system? Because it's a philosophy. How do you actually make decisions on the ground in projects? And that's what we're all about with SAFE system assessments. And I'll come back to that. But I'll start with this diagram. This is a very old diagram. Well, an old diagram. I'd say very old. It's an old diagram of the SAFE system. It was one of the original diagrams in Australia. And I was working in Vic Roads, Victorian Road Authority at the time. This was being debated as to whether at a federal level we should adopt this and at state levels we should adopt this, and they're playing around with the diagram a little bit. Don't worry if you can't see it too well, but I'll explain it a little bit more. But actually, Max, I want to give a prize there. The person who can tell me the year, so I was talking about whether or not we adopt this at a federal level, state level, the year that the federal government adopted the SAFE system as the approach we would take for road safety, and this was the diagram they were using at that time. It was adopted. First person to put it in the chat, the year, have a guess. You don't lose any mark. It's not a marked thing. It's just to give out a prize. And
Melissa saying 2011, Bronte 2003, 2004, 1991. Steve, 2002.
Di's got it up there.
Di's got it. 2004.
Yep, 2004.
Well done, Di. You're on the prize parade already.
Yep, first prize winner. And how do they get these prizes, Max?
Sent out with the certificates. So once the course is completed, we've got a note of everyone that wins prizes. So yes, we'll make sure to keep on top of that.
Yeah, 2004 was actually adopted at a federal level. So people sometimes think the SAFE system is new. It's not new. It's taken us a long time to get it more publicly known and something that people are integrating into their projects or trying to understand. There's been a big misconception that it's just, good road safety is, what we've always been doing, just do more of it. It's slightly different to that. You'll see that. But anyway, let's have a look at this original diagram. At the center of the SAFE system diagram, we see human tolerance to physical force. That's a funny thing to have at the center of a diagram. Human tolerance to physical force. How much force can humans take before they break? Before they're killed or seriously injured? Then you see we've got speeds, roads and roadsides, and vehicles around as the sort of bubbles, the elements. People sometimes call them pillars. I don't call them pillars. I call them elements because it's very much an interactive system, and they're not sort of standing alone like a silo or a pillar. They're very interactive. But anyway, it doesn't matter exactly. But that was it. That was the safe system. Safe for speed, safe for vehicles, safe for roadsides. And there was debate. There was intense debate that was happening. And the debate basically went, hang on, what about the people, the people using this system and making sure they're safe? And there was sort of almost two camps that came about. And there was a camp that said, yeah, they've got to be an integral, like, you know, they're the ultimate sort of ones to achieve safety. If they're in control, you know, they're controlling the vehicle, they're in control of the system, making choices. They're the ultimate. And there was another camp that was saying, no. I mean, you create a system so all human mistakes are accounted for and managed within the system. And that is like a fundamental premise of the safe system, is that humans are going to make mistakes. And so our system needs to cater for those mistakes, manage them, and mean that death and serious injury is not the result. Anyway, so these two battles and camps, and you know, at the last minute, and it was at some more political levels, this little square was put around the safe system: alert and compliant road users. And you know, a lot of us really thought that was a big failure, and I was in the camp that said it's failed. That's failed what the safe system is all about, because it gives a complete sort of get out of jail card for anybody designing the system, managing the system, because it's too easy to just go, well, they weren't alert and compliant, and you know, they've got to be responsible for their own safety. The reality is that humans are fallible, and they're not alert all the time, and they're not compliant all the time, and that does not mean that they should be killed or seriously injured, or that they should kill or seriously injure somebody else. Yeah, it means that they should maybe be fined, or they should be you know, somehow penalized or something like that, but not killed or seriously injured, or kill or seriously injure somebody else. That's so that was an original diagram. And then, you know, lots of generations later, and we're continually looking to update this. We saw lots of different diagrams come out. You'll see different ones that you probably recognize. And there's another sort of 10 out there that are all very similar. People love a circle. And this is the one that I want to talk to. I'll use this throughout this session. It's not to say it's the only one, but they're all fairly much the same to a degree. At the middle of the safe system is a human. And it's a reminder there that we are operating a transport system for humans. Yes, we need to move goods and the like, but people are there, and we have an aspiration of zero death and serious injury. There is an ethical premise here that says it's not ethical to trade off human health and life for other transport objectives, and the safe system won't do that. Now that's, you know, a very simple way of saying something that's like so complex, but you know, if you take that sort of principle as something, you know, quite important, it helps us with some decision making on the ground. There's a few key principles here. The human body is vulnerable. We saw that in that old diagram. Human bodies are vulnerable, so there's only so much force that we can take before we break, and I'll analyze that force in detail with you, because it is absolutely critical to the safe system. I'll give you a little snapshot into the course here. We are in the game of energy management. That's so important to our work these days. Energy management. How do we manage kinetic energy so it's distributed or dissipated or absorbed in a way that doesn't kill or seriously injure our community? An interesting way of looking at the transport system, isn't it? Another principle here is that people make mistakes, and it's squarely put into here. We are dealing with humans make mistakes all the time. I've made many mistakes already this morning. None of them have led to death and serious injury, hopefully. The the thing is that we make mistakes. We learn from our mistakes. We make small mistakes. We make big mistakes. We make mistakes that are a little more premeditated than other mistakes. But we're just making mistakes all the time. And the very rare chance within the road network that that mistake will lead to a crash. I mean, it is very rare at an individual level. At a collective level, it's quite common. But we need to now try to create a system that caters for those mistakes. And we have this shared responsibility. And this is a real upgrade from where we've come from with the SAFE system in the early days. But it's sort of saying that everybody has a responsibility. Yeah, the road users, we want to try to get better behavior out of the road users, but we recognize the fact that they're human and they're going to fail. But the system design, and by system designer, I mean everybody on this webinar, certainly. Anybody involved in the design of the roads, the policy, the legislation, the vehicle regulations, the legislation, anything associated with the system, they're a system designer. And the reality is, and most of the very progressive countries will say, in the end, no matter what happens on the road network, the ultimate responsibility goes back to the system designer. Doesn't matter how absurd, crazy the behavior was out there. We don't condone it. We don't encourage it. And we will try to lessen it. But in the end, the system has failed to let that result in death and serious injury if it did. Now, that's a bit confronting. And certainly in my many years in road safety, I've investigated hundreds of fatality crashes. And a lot of them, it's just unbelievable, the behavior. But you think, how is it possible that we let that sort of behavior happen on the road network? And no, I'm not saying like that from a changing the individual perspective. I'm just saying, how do we give somebody a vehicle that can go that fast? How do we let the road environment mean they can go that fast? How do we not have restrictions in place in one way or another that stop this actually happening? But that's an aside. We'll get back to that sort of thinking. Then we still do see the elements around there. We've got the speeds, the vehicles, the roads and the roadsides, and the road users. And we're trying to improve all of these with these principles in mind. And so just to refocus on that, those principles are, we have this aspiration of no death or serious injury. I know it's not going to happen, next year, and I know it's not going to happen in 10 years' time, but we are aspiring to that, and we should be making decisions with that in mind. Now, a number of jurisdictions have set their date where they're going for zero death and serious injury, and they're doing modeling and forecasting and backcasting and trying to work out when that will be. I'll give a prize for the person who can tell me in New South Wales what is the date that they have pegged for zero death and serious injury in road transport.
Hey, Taylor, 2056.
Yeah, Lee has hit that nail on the head. 2056. So that's exciting. And it's going to require a huge amount of work and a huge change to our system. But I like the fact that we're going for it. I don't have time to elaborate on why it's actually really amazingly effective to set a date where you're aspiring for zero. But I want to do it very quickly because it's so exciting. If you set a date where you've aspired for zero and you're up here at 350 deaths, that's today, that's 2056. And it's going to basically go like this, and then it accelerates down basically when you model it out because of some technology. But you do that, and that's the path, and that's taken into account all of your infrastructure investment, your new speed management program, vehicle technology, changes in legislation, all these other things that you've packed into how this could possibly happen. If your politicians decide, I don't know, something, I don't know, Pacific Highway is going to go to 120 kilometers per hour because we'll get more freight efficiency and we'll get, you know, something crazy that's just a complete myth, like, oh, people won't get tired because they don't drive something. Like, it's just ridiculous stuff. But anyway, politicians sometimes come up with these crazy things. You go, well, you can simply just go back to them and go, but this is the number of our community that's going to be killed between now and then. And by doing that, you've moved it to here. And it now goes like this. And that decision is going to cost 53 lives and 522 serious injuries to people in New South Wales. I just want you to be aware of exactly how many people you're going to kill and seriously injure by signing that. That wakes them up a little bit. Anyway, that's just a little aside. Let me talk about safety culture. Let's get out of transport for a second. Let's move away from transport. Let's go into widget production. Let's have a look at safety culture. And I know some of you are highly experienced safety people, be it occupational health and safety or transport safety. So I think you'll have seen similar things, but I'll just talk about the production of, I don't know, widgets, some widget thing. And back in the day, let's go back in time. We'll go back to a time when factories that were producing widgets were a very open system, and they had, you know, the workers came in and they got some instructions on how to use the machines, and they, you know, they were told, oh, that's a really dangerous thing. Don't put your hands in there, and then patted on the back and said, you know, safety is your responsibility. And you know, look after yourself because it's pretty dangerous in there. That's what we call a pathological safety culture. You know, where it's up to everybody to protect themselves the best they can. And of course, we see in those, you know, back in the day there, we had arms ripped off, we had people crushed in machines, and it was quite a frequent thing that would be happening. And it was, you know, that's the cost of, you know, building the economy. That was how it's in, and, you know, they've got to take responsibility for their own safety. We told them it was dangerous. Then you sort of get up to this reactive where people are then starting to say, well, yeah, okay, we've got to fix this machine. It's now killed 2 people, or, you know, ripped 3 kids' arms off. And, we've got to do something about it. And so, you know, some guards are put on the machine, or only certain people are allowed to use the machine, or these sorts of things, or there's extra training or the like for people who are using the machine, or maybe they're given a stick to push the things in instead of having to push it in with their hand. That's what we call reactive, addressing those issues. Then you get the economists come along, and they start to look at, okay, well, this is actually costing the factory owner quite a bit of money in lost productivity when the machines are down, in payouts to families and others. And so they do some work, and they calculate, and they say, well, if you actually invest £20,000, pounds back in the day, you know, £20,000, you will actually get £60,000 in increased productivity and less payouts that you have to make. And we've come up with this thing called a benefit cost ratio, a BCR. For every pound invested, you get £3 back. It's a BCR of 3. So it's a good investment. And that's where you start to get into this calculator. And you find your balance. What can I afford with widget production and the like? What's a good investment? And find something, you know, just suitable in there. What we aspire to, and what's Safe System aligned, is a proactive safety culture. And it's where you have an incredibly high level of safety set, and you produce your widgets up to that level of safety, and you don't go beyond it. And it's how we operate the widget factories in developed countries these days. We have no hesitation in shutting down a factory if there's a risk there, and until that is rectified, because it's unacceptable. And you need to invest heavily in continuing to maintain a safety culture at this level. Okay, it's not just like you get some things in order and get some processes documented and then happy days, everything's good. No, it's a continual ongoing task. But when you relate that back, and I'm sure you already have done it, to the transport system, and I've given you a few little clues in there anyway, I put mobility instead of widget production. But if we translate this back, where do we sit with our road networks in Australia and New Zealand? And the reality is we are across a lot of these in a number of ways. We certainly pathological, absolutely. We have a lot of pathological safety culture. We license young drivers, we pat them on the back and we say, it's very dangerous out there. Safety is your responsibility, and good luck. We're reactive. We certainly are looking for problem locations and trying to address those. We are calculating. Oh, we love a benefit cost ratio, don't we? And that's certainly just so wedded into what we do. We do have elements of proactivity, and that's good to see. And I'm excited that we've got glimmers of really good hope in there. And a couple of quick examples on proactive safety cultures within the transport environment, sort of glimmers of hope. Continuous safety barriers we see rolled out on new roads, new major roads these days. We're not saying, oh, well, we'll just wait. We'll only do it where there's particularly high risk or people have crashed. We don't roll it out and then go, okay, we'll put a little bit there because some people have run off the road there, or we'll put a little bit up there. No, we just say continuous rollout of safety barrier systems in these new road environments. So that's good. The other one, and I think this one's a really vivid example, and it's always been for me, and I really sometimes use it in different ways, is school speed zones. I mean, school speed zones are an example of good proactive road safety. I mean, yeah, we can debate and argue the exact speed they should be. Should they be 30? Should they be 20? Should they be 40? Whatever, but let's put that aside. The idea of the school speed zone is proactive, because you don't wait for kids to be killed. I mean, they went everywhere, whole schools where the school gates are abutting and those sort of things. And if you calculate it, which interestingly I did for Victoria, it is one of the most horrible investments under our current benefit cost ratio structure in transport investments. It's just a bad investment from that perspective. And I often challenge the economists when they come in and they say, well, your ideas, very nice, but it's something else. The benefit cost ratio is on its bad. And I go, well, okay, if we're going to just completely operate our transport system like that, we've got to start getting rid of school speed zones. And the reason for that is that the way you calculate a benefit cost ratio in these scenarios is really to understand what is the benefit going to be, and basically to work out the benefit in a road safety project, the way it is done is to set a dollar value to human life, somewhere around $3 million, $4 million, depending on which way you do it. Can go much higher than that, but $3 million for a human life. And we work out the effectiveness of the treatment, how many lives that's going to save. And the way you work out how many lives it's going to save is usually based on, it used to be, well, it is still often based on the number of people that have been killed in an area that you're treating. And so if you do that with school speed zones, there's just not enough kids killed. There's just not enough kids killed. And so the impact on it is the small increase in travel time for every single vehicle that travels through a school speed zone. So maybe like, a second, 2 seconds per vehicle every day, all the time the school speed zone. And what you do is then equate that to a dollar value in lost productivity. Now, to me, that's absolute crap, because like these seconds you can't add them up the way they do. But the economists don't see it that way. They just put their economist's hat on, or they've already got it on, and they just calculate it out. And so you go, just disastrous investment. But the hope and the reason we can sort of see this is that it is just grotesque to say this, isn't it? Like, protection of kids, we don't stuff around with that. It's going to cost us half a second or two each, we do it because it's the protection of kids. So it's a pretty good way to think. We're willing to do this as a society under the right constraints, and as we should be. Anyway, just high-level philosophical stuff at the moment, and we'll sort of contextualize this and put it into practice shortly. But let's have a little quiz, Max. And one of the questions you've been given the answer to already, and one of the questions you haven't, and you're just going to have a guess. Although I think some of you have might have seen the question before. But, Max, is that one going to come up?
Yes, let me launch away. So module 1, whole 1, which of the following is not a key principle of the SAFE system? Aim for no death or serious injury, aim for no mistakes on the road, people are vulnerable, people make mistakes, shared responsibility. So hopefully everyone can see that up on their screen. Please just click on the answer on the screen. Don't need to type it into the chat or anything like that. And you can submit your answer. And the second question is, at what speed did Usain Bolt cross the finish line in his world record 100-meter sprint? 24, 34, 44, 54, 64 kilometers per hour. So have a guess. Chuck your answers in, and what we can do is once everyone's populated that, we can share the results and see what everyone's thinking.
And people are not being marked on this. In fact, we don't even know who's guessing what. Right. So the quiz we talked about, that's at the end, right? And that's the one you will be marked on. Has similar sorts of questions, doesn't it? Except for the Usain Bolt one, we haven't covered in the content, but you know, the first one's a good example of what kind of questions might pop up.
That's right. So these answers are just anonymous, so don't be too concerned if you're not 100% sure. Just give it a go, and we can share the results shortly. We've got 86 people submitted, so we're nearly there. We'll give it a 10 more seconds just to let everyone populate those answers. All right, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to end the poll now, and I'll share the results so everyone can see how the group fared. Ooh, looks like we've got certainly a majority saying that aim for no mistakes on the road is not a key principle of the SAFE system. Does that sound right, Ken?
Yes. Yeah, no, well done. Well done there, everybody. It was yeah, it's minimize and manage is a better way to put it. I mean, we would love no mistakes on the road, but we're realistic. We know we're dealing with humans, and that's not going to be our aim. That's wasted investment. We minimize and manage,
Good stuff. And question. Yeah. Yes, we had a little bit of a bell curve happening there, but it seems to be centered around the 44 kilometer per hour mark. Is that how fast you run, Ken?
I wish. Maybe if I'm lucky, I'll get to that 24 at maximum speed. But no, 44 kilometers per hour is correct. That was the speed Usain Bolt crossed the finish line. Some of you probably calculated your, did some little maths there with 100 meters, 9.8. What's that in kilometers per hour? But you had to accelerate, remember? And let's stop that. I'll stop that. And why am I asking about Usain Bolt in a road safety course? Well, what I want you to do is imagine Usain Bolt running there at 44 kilometers per hour, and we've parked a 2015 Toyota Camry at the end of his lane. And he comes running down 44 kilometers an hour, bang, hits that Toyota Camry. Will he survive? Will he survive? Well, the answer is yes, he will most likely survive. I mean, he is built like a tank, isn't he? He's a hulk of a human. Pick any of us mortals up and fling us at that car at 44 kilometers an hour. Well, it's a bit dicey as to whether we will survive. In fact, there's a nice bit of a correlation between your maximum running speed and your ability to withstand running into a solid object at that speed. So you should be able to run into a brick wall or a tree at your maximum running speed. You'll mess yourself up, right? But odds on you'll recover to lead a normal, healthy life. You might break some bones and things, but you should recover to lead a normal, healthy life. It's kind of how we evolve. So that'll be assignment 1. You're running full no, of course not. But nice analogy to go with, isn't it? But we have a bit more science behind it. We have a bit more evidence, a few more studies around it, and there's a lot more going on in the background out of a number of the universities around Australia to get more precision on some of these curves, to change them, to get other factors involved. But for now, I want to use these sort of fairly basic curves. They're still what Austroads will put in most of their guides because everybody seems fairly happy with these. Yeah, there's debate going on. I'll put it like that, but everybody seems okay for us to run with these for now, which we will continue to run with, and we have for a while. So down the bottom here, we have collision speed. This is speed of impact. This is, get speed limits out of your mind for now, just the speed of impact, okay? And this is fatality probability. Chance that somebody, any member of the population, struck at that speed will be killed. And this is passenger vehicle, car, hitting pedestrian. And we see there that around 10, 20, 30 kilometers per hour, it's pretty likely the pedestrian will survive. Up around sort of 60, 70, 80, it's highly likely they're going to be killed. There's the great man himself. He's come in quite high up the curve, but that's due to his stature, his ability to withstand those forces. Old people can't run as fast, certainly can't handle the forces. What we sort of know is that we can handle these sorts of forces, and hopefully this will stream for you. And he goes on to win the gold medal at the Olympics the next year, and because he would recover. That's what we're designed for. But we've got all creative and got things that propel us way faster than that, and that come at us faster than that. We have this for more crashes than just cars hitting pedestrians. We've got it for vehicle to vehicle right angle crashes, okay? So this is a right angle crash where this vehicle, which we call the bullet vehicle is the one that does the damage, strikes the target vehicle at a right angle. And we know there that around 30 or 40 or 50 kilometers per hour, it's highly likely, well, it's likely that the occupant of the target vehicle, driver's side if a driver's side strike, or passenger side if a passenger side strike, will survive. Up at your sort of 70, 80, 90, 100 kilometers an hour or there, we know it's highly likely that the driver of the target vehicle or the occupant of the target vehicle will be killed. And for head-on crashes, we know that it's up a little bit even higher, 50, 60, 70 kilometers per hour, pretty likely to survive. And that's the speed of each vehicle, right? 70 kilometers an hour for this vehicle, 70 kilometers an hour, closing speed of 140. Impact forces on the occupant of the vehicle, 70 kilometer per hour crash. Some of you are probably now questioning the physics of that. Actually, Max, there's a fun Mythbusters episode that crashes cars into each other and then into brick walls to prove exactly the point I'm making. So do you reckon we can pop that up onto Moodle and then everybody can watch Mythbusters on work time, because that's always fun. But essentially the idea, yeah, essentially the idea is that two vehicles, the same weight, same mass, when they collide, we're thinking about the occupant of the vehicle and the forces that are on them, and they will go from 70 kilometers an hour to 0. So it's the equivalent of going from 70 kilometers an hour to 0, hitting a brick wall. So yeah, watch the Mythbusters episode. So we're starting to now gauge this like understanding of speeds, crash types, vehicles involved, and the chances of death and death in this case. And so what we do, and what's sort of been done, is this line's been drawn at this 10% mark. 30 kilometers per hour where pedestrians can be struck, 50 kilometers per hour for side impact, 70 kilometers per hour for head-on crashes. And they've been sort of pegged as the safe system threshold speeds. Now, why have they picked that? Well, there's a few reasons. That's about the point where these curves exponentially kick up. They go really bad really quickly after that point. Okay, so that's one reason. Second reason is we're talking about, particularly the sort of one element of the system really here. And we've got all the other elements of the system working hard. So, I mean, a kind of a generalistic idea is if you can get everybody, every element of the system down to sort of these 10% levels, we'll have an incredibly safe system. But it does still sort of say, well, it's not quite there. The other one that I always talk about, which a lot of people don't talk about, but is that we are so far from operating our transport system within these tolerances at the moment that we almost need to have some realistic targets for us to move forward with. Because if we start to say, well, 10 kilometers an hour, it just becomes beyond what anybody will possibly work to at this stage. But the idea being that we need to start factoring in the energy transfer. It's kinetic energy is what does the killing. And we need to factor this into our decision making. Now, there's lots more crashes out there on the road network than just those ones that I put in there, in those three curves. And here's a general sort of chart. Now, you do have to have a lot of, your own judgment in this, but it's a very sort of general chart. And you see there that you can pick a crash type. It could be tree, car side impacting into a tree. And we know that sort of around the 10, 20, up to 30, and then it starts getting really bad, 30, 40, 50, and then it's really bad after that. So the black being the worst. It's just a general chart, but you'll see there are some numbers. And you'll be coming back to these numbers because that's starting to give you a little window into safe system assessing, because a key part of a safe system assessment is to quantify the severity of the crash using a sort of broad brush approach of numbers. So sort of put a pin in that for now, or maybe just remember that there's some pretty important information presented on that slide. I'll present this one and then I'll pause and see if there's any questions or comments that I need to address. But one of the banes of my existence in road safety, it frustrates me so much, is this diagram. And the reason it frustrates me is not because it's incorrect. It's because of how it's used. Now, this diagram comes up so often. New people to road safety discover this diagram and they're so excited and they share it. And what it is a crash causation diagram. And it's come from a crash causation study. And these happen about every 5 to 10 years, somebody comes out with a new world's biggest crash causation study, and they get more complex, and they in-depth analyze 3,000 crashes, and they spit out some results, and they show the complexity of the system and everything like that. But what ends up happening is, you could say road user here instead of driver, between 90 and 95% of crash causation is the road user. The roads play a part in some of those ones, and occasionally the road does its own thing. That would be like a tree falling on a vehicle or something like that. And the vehicle, even smaller one, so a tire blowout causes a crash or something like that. So, yeah, and I don't dispute any of that. Wonderful research, brilliant people doing this research, right? What I have a problem with is then how practitioners take this information and they say, well, that's where we need to target our work. The biggest cause of the crashes, so we need to change the humans. And the thing is that a lot of countries, a lot of jurisdictions, after seeing this diagram, will get fixated on that and just have these massive, huge investments in trying to change humans. Now, humans can change, and we do need to continually work on that. They are a part of the system. They're actually one of the hardest parts of the system to change. And I'm not saying ignore humans and we can get better performance and the like, but the reality is we need to think about this completely differently. We need to think about it as a system failure. Our system has failed in order for this crash to happen. Of course, the human is going to be 95% of the mistake making. They're the human. Humans make mistakes. Why didn't our system cater for this? And so we need to then understand, how do we change the system? How do we change the vehicles, the roadside environment, speeds that are being traveled, and the way that the human is utilizing the vehicle or the footpath or the bike or whatever they're doing. Now, Austroads came up with this diagram, and they put driver excess out here and they put driver inexperience out here as sort of these outliers. I would want these in because they're just system failures in their own right. The reason they sort of put them out there is probably because it's going to be looked at slightly differently how we address some of this compared to the majority of crashes that are out there that aren't driver excess and are driver experience. They're just normal people going about their business. And that's actually important to understand. That the majority of crashes are generally normal. This is deaths and serious injury. Generally normal people going about their business, making sort of acceptable human mistakes. Now, I would say there are no unacceptable human mistakes because they're mistakes. But anyway, the fixation often comes down in road safety to this part: deliberate violations. And there's a big juicy Austroads report. What's it titled? Like errors in the system or something like that, which the Centre for Automotive Safety Research did for Austroads. A big 300-page report which analyzes this in detail. But essentially, what it comes out with is somewhere around the 35 to 40% of fatalities sit down here. So that's pretty high. But when you bring it for serious injuries as well, it comes down to about 30%. So it's somewhere around 32% of death and serious injury are what they classify as deliberate violations. And they are, they're your super high speed through your residential areas, or driving the wrong way down the carriageway of the motorway at high speed, ice addicts and these sorts of things. Stuff that the media just latches onto. It's a very juicy story, makes headlines and all that. However, that leaves the majority of our trauma sitting up here in slips, lapses, mistakes, unintentional violations, human mistakes happening. I'm not going to elaborate on that much more, just to say that victim blaming is not sort of, well, actually, no, that comes into you'll do that. Okay, I'm gonna stop talking there. It's a really good time for us to do this little exercise and have a little stretch and fill the coffee up break while you do the exercise. Remember, you're not being marked on it, and certainly this exercise is one where there's a few that you could go to other answers, and that it's an argument. All right, correct. But over to you, Max.
Thank you, Ken. So I'll launch this poll, which is, as Ken is saying, a mix and match exercise. So what will happen is you'll see 5 questions which relate to those 5 traditional approach cells that you can see there. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you'll have each of those answers on the right-hand side, which is a safe system approach. And it's a matter of just lining those up to make sure that what you think would be the equivalent safe system way of looking at a traditional kind of element. So I've just launched a poll then. Hopefully that made sense, but it's just a matter of matching those columns on the left-hand side with the columns on the right-hand side and posting that in the poll.
And if for some reason polls aren't appearing for you, which occasionally happens, you can just jot down on a bit of paper, 1E, 2A, 3B, or whatever you come up with to check. You remember you're not being marked on this.
Well, we've got you, Ken. Sazo has just asked, does deliberate violations include things like where the road design induces rule violation?
No, that's above the line. That's a I can't remember what they define it, which one they define it as, but no, that's not. And nor would intentional changes by the road designer. No. Let's just, the answer is no.
We had another great question for by Sazo as well, just regarding the curves that we were showing and how they relate to a certain type of vehicle. But given that that average vehicle is kind of shifting, we're getting into higher vehicles as well as heavier vehicles going for the SUVs. That's what we're starting to see a lot more of in our Australian network. Is there an opportunity for these graphs to shift in time, Ken, to kind of reflect that average vehicle?
Yeah, so you're spot on there. I mean, those curves they're based on European data from a while back, 10 years ago at least. Mind you, the European fleet's way more advanced than our fleet, which is a whole different challenge. And they are real world attempts, so they're catering for their curves showing older vehicles, newer vehicles from that fleet. But as we continue to do that, we get updates for the fleet, we get better we get better features in the vehicles. Those will shift. As I mentioned, a number of universities doing work to try to do that for the current Australian fleet, and also to include high-level serious injury in some of those curves to get us some more precision and re-questioning a few of the sort of base level assumptions out of the curves. But for now, just let's stick to those curves for our assessing, with a little bit of ability to alter them as you see.
I remember many years ago, Ken, actually sitting in this course and reflecting on the fact that it is the probability of fatality that's measured on the y-axis when we are looking at in safe system assessments to reduce both fatality and serious injuries. So probably these graphs would look a lot different if we were looking at the probability of reducing fatality and serious injuries on the y-axis, and those speed ranges would be much further shifted across to the left, much lower speeds. But we're certainly a long way from achieving just zero fatalities on the road network. So probably best just to aim there as a step towards something better.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. It's a complex one there. The fatality, I think, was utilised just simply because that's the data that they had available to them. We get in those ones, so that's why they sort of did it that way. There are some curves for serious injuries available from that Australia has published. They do shift things and alter things a bit, and yeah, there's some sort of lower speeds, but I think this is pretty generally accepted and good starting point. And you're right, in the future we can alter those. But let's give everybody a little break there, Matt. What, another minute or so?
Yep, no problem.
All right, Max, I think we better keep ticking along.
Very good. I might just end the poll. Don't worry if you didn't manage to get time to finish that off. We'll just share the results. I won't go through all the answers because I think Ken will be able to display that on the screen, which will be a little bit clearer, but just have a reflection on the answers you got.
Yeah, I'll just have a quick scan of how people went. Yep. All right, I'm just going to stop that and I will go through it on the screen. It's easier to do it that way. And as we said, a few could go to a few spots. So don't worry. It's more an exercise to sort of reinforce some of that thinking for you. Victim blaming. Well, we're talking now about recognizing human error and trying to minimize its consequence. And that's shared responsibility. Emphasis on road user education and compliance. Effort to create a forgiving system now. We're certainly not ignoring road user education and compliance, but we're just more of that effort is going into creating for that forgiving system. A focus on crash reduction, enhanced focus on consequence, especially severe injury minimization. So understanding that we're not going to eliminate crashes, we're just going to make the consequence of the much less. We're going to try to stop crashes happening, absolutely, but being aware that some will still happen and we need to manage those. 4 pillars action independently, over to 4 pillars optimized jointly as an interaction, the interacting elements of the system, and mobility safety balance to now maximizing safe mobility. So it's like word changing, but kind of important. I think Ian Cameron made a pretty nice statement in 2016 on a sort of world stage, actually. We need a paradigm shift in road safety policy to stop the road death epidemic, and we need it now. It is unrealistic to expect that education enforcement alone will bring the needed step change. Even road users who know and follow the rules make mistakes. A safe system creates an environment in which simple mistakes will no longer kill people, or kill or seriously injure people is really what we're aiming at. That's a nice little statement. All right, let's have a look at a road. This is the Melbourne Highway. It's a central barrier system in flush median. And it's 2.2 meter wide median at some points, ducks down, narrower than that at different points. That's 100 kilometers per hour. And it's a fairly new installation in this photo. Now, you don't know this road at all. Some of you might, but for a very, very long time, it was a centre line, barrier line, painted barrier line. That was all that separated streams of traffic. And they wanted to put in this central barrier system like this. They came across a huge amount of resistance from all sorts of areas. Okay. Now, I could run through some of them, but I think I'll give you the opportunity to type in a few ideas on what were the blockers, what were things stopping them implementing this project. It was very new. The idea of a central barrier in a flush median like this in a narrow centre was fairly new. There's a couple of things that I'm going to pop in here, not to say they were the biggest hurdles, but ones that I thought were quite interesting. And if you happen to say one of those when you type it in, I'm going to give you a prize. So just reasons why during the development, the planning, development, design of this project, what were these hurdles, challenges that took amazing effort to overcome?
Bronte's popped one in saying the ability for fauna to cross. Ken, is that on your magic list?
It's not. It has come up. It did come up in this project. It comes up quite often. Yes. So ability for koalas, wombats, kangaroos seem not be. Although some people do claim that kangaroos can get sort of stay in the middle, although I see lots of kangaroos jumping them, but I don't know if there's good data on that. But certainly, yes, that was analysed. It wasn't one of the ones that I I put, but it certainly came up on quite a few
We've had
occasions.
a few more come in, so I'll just read through them, Ken. Clearing or proximity to existing trees, maintenance of central barrier and the safety implications, the ability to make a U-turn or overtake, motorcycle contacts, deflection of these barrier types, limiting opportunity for overtaking, particularly on heavy truck routes, the steep cutting, and does the traffic flow change at different times? A few different ideas came in there. Ken, any of those on your list?
Yes. So maintenance. So who was that? Melissa?
Melissa.
Maintenance was one, and deflection of the type of barrier.
That was from
Afshin. Those would, and yeah, so Simon also popped that one in at the same time there. So prizes for them. But all these other ones that are coming up were all part of the challenge. Yes. I mean, it's like this group has tried to implement one of these, I would say. Yeah, the ability, so you remove the ability for one lane to overtake. What about broken down vehicles? What about the ability to enforce? What if the roadside's on fire? How do you get over there? We had the motorcyclists going berserk. We had the ability to turn around. So a few access points and they had to go down the road and turn. There was other, I mean, many other ones. Maintenance was a big one in terms of the maintenance crew saying, well, it's going to get hit and then we're going to have to fix it. And how do we fix it safely? Because we don't have the ability to sort of contraflow. You know, how does that all work? How do we fix potholes? Because, you know, we're going to be trapped in this area. The deflection space was a really interesting one. So the deflection of the barrier system. So those who know wire rope barrier systems, they know they deflect when struck, and that will deflect into the oncoming lane by a little bit if struck. That one just boggled my mind that it added about a year to this project in the debate there, because it doesn't meet design standards. And then, yeah, it was just this big challenge where people refused to have it go in. And we go, well, it's a little line separating now. Surely this is better. And then admittedly, the debate was around, you know, is the right barrier type and, you know, how can we do? So there was quite a bit going on there. But the sort of year that lasted was unfortunately some serious injuries that occurred. Anyway, the point being, the reason I sort of bring this up and I generate a bit of this is that we are trying to change a system here, right? It's not about doing what we've always done, which is a white line and maybe putting some rumble strips on it, some audio tactile edge line or center line audio tactile. Often people refer to it as rumble strips, technically not rumble strips. They go across the lane, but that's not the point. But, you know, these things are good and the bright lines and that. But people are still going to make mistakes and they're going to leave their lane, and we need to try to stop them hitting other vehicles. And it's different to the way that we've, you know, designed and operated these roads for a long time. But unfortunately, we need to change things, and you will face challenges all the time. But the one thing is that a safe system assessment provides this nice tool for us to use to present the actual expected outcomes in alignment with safe system principles. We don't get caught up in these design standard little bits and pieces. And yes, there's other challenges, the project team, but it's adding more power to the road safety argument in some of these jobs. So this one did go in, for a decent stretch, and it was one of the first ones. And you know, there were different tweaks to the design and retrofits, and you know, this has got your old stack cushion there, motorcycle friendly cushioning around the posts. It doesn't do a huge amount, but at least you get your barrier system in the middle. And of course it got hit. I mean, that's what it's there for. We put it there, it's going to get hit. And interestingly, this one got a phone call from the one of the people involved who was calling the region that put it in. And you've probably been in that situation. You're in the regional office and you get the phone call from the public and you go, here we go, and get shouted at about something. All right. And they actually were just calling to say, hey, just want to thank you, whoever it was, for putting this barrier system in. I'm pretty sure you saved my life. Somebody just came directly at our vehicle and then, hit the barrier and went along the barrier and didn't crash. And that the engineer in the region was smart enough to, quickly get onto the comms and engage with people, and then a little video was made. And we've put that video onto your memory stick into Moodle. If you haven't got your pack yet, it's in Moodle there. Two 3-minute videos. Some of you have seen it, but just a really powerful video showing that these people aren't bad people that are involved in this. They're lovely people. Simply one of them made a mistake, fell asleep, and the system kicked in. All right, human-made mistake. Crash causation, human failure, absolutely. Did the system let that result in death or serious injury? No. One part of the system kicked in and said, and basically redirected the energy, slowed it down over time. If that barrier system wasn't there, we would be, well, the police and industry would be pointing their finger and saying, why did you drive? You hadn't, you were obviously fatigued, you drove, and, the finger would be being pointed. So this to me is really great safe system in action. It's a really good example. And there's many of them out there. I just picked this one because it's vivid. We've got pictures of it. We've got a nice little video to run with. But you could be looking at other elements of the system to kick in. So this is the old Swiss cheese model, which originally actually I think came out of the US Postal Service, trying to understand why packages would arrive damaged at houses and looking at the different layers of their system and failure mechanisms and those sorts of things. And then it was related to road trauma, 2006, and a few others. But, we've got the infrastructure, and basically for a crash to happen, we need to find a hole in all these slices of Swiss cheese. And, the infrastructure, the vehicle, the speed, the road user. And if we can close off holes or make them smaller, we're finding these ways to break the link in a number of different ways. And that's what we're sort of all about. Any questions for me, Max, or do I just keep ploughing ahead?
I'm just typing away in the background, Ken. I think everything's coming along just fine, but certainly getting some good comments. Thank you to James for just the mention that it's easy to get bogged down in the issues of if it's not meeting that deflection compliance, and then, you can't put this in the median. But as you said, Ken, like if you don't have it there, then all you've got is a single solid line marking to protect you from oncoming vehicles. So you're basically willing to accept the risk of head-ons as to oppose of somewhat of a risk of deflection occurring into that traffic lane. So yeah, it's good perspective. Yeah.
And safe system assessment's a wonderful tool to draw people out of the depths of that detail to look at what is going to happen with this. That being said, I don't want people to lose sight of the importance of detail and understanding it. It's just the ability to contextualize your detail and how it's important, and understand innovation, changes, design exceptions are all part of what we're going to be having to do more and more of going forward in order to alter our system for areas that are hideously deficient in terms of safe system alignment, like running a road, separating vehicles going 100 kilometers per hour plus by a white line. I want to talk about some other elements of the safe system before we get into a lot of discussion about roads, roadsides, and speeds. So I really want to talk about the road users, the vehicles, and then just a little more sort of speed physics fundamentals to start to start with. That's the reason we do this, because a safe system assessment is a holistic look at the system. It is not just the road and the infrastructure. You are trying to think broadly about how do we create a system that, you know, will be safe, that understands human tolerance to physical force, understands humans are going to make mistakes, for us to create a system that manages that. So in a safe system assessment, a full safe system assessment, we do an analysis, a look into the road users that are using the area and what kind of education, enforcement, licensing systems, things are in place. We also look at the vehicles that are using the system, what safety features do they have, and the like. So there is a lot more to it than simply sort of understanding, is there a barrier there or not? What type of barrier is it? What's the deflection? What's the flare rate? You know, those sorts of road-related things that we'll get into a bit. So let's just touch on these. These are also going to help you when you're at a barbecue. If we're allowed to get back to having barbecues, although New South Wales and Queensland enjoy. You're a road safety professional. You're in the game, and so to have some understanding of some of the evidence bases around some things that the public often talk about. And certainly, if you're stuck for conversation at that barbecue, you simply say to the person, "I work in road safety. How do you think we can improve road safety?" And then there you go. There's your afternoon covered for conversation. Because everybody has an opinion, and often they're very sure that their opinion is right, and it's based on their experience over often many years of driving, walking, riding. But what we have to do as road safety professionals is look at the research, the evidence, and not base it on our personal opinion, our personal experience, because that is not a representative sample. Okay, and that is one of the hardest things to do in the road safety profession, is to draw out your personal experiences and not think that that covers everything, and to say, what is the research? What is the data? What is the evidence showing us? And I'm going to sort of come back to that in a number of things, but in road user areas, it's really quite prominent. We know that things that sort of work are around education, encouragement, enforcement, and some sort of licensing system. I put graduated licensing system there. There's tweaks on that. I'm going to start with education. What do we know works? We know that educating the little humans works, and I don't think that's a revelation to anybody. I mean, it's pretty consistent across everything that, you know, education is best targeted at our young, and they respond to that education. I mean, we do discover that we can get some pretty good changes to the parents in parent behavior by instilling messages in the kids, like, you know, you must wear your seatbelt, everybody must wear their seatbelt, and so they're in their car and they tell their parents to put their seatbelts on, and so you can get some good sort of extra traction out of that. But certainly that education through a child's whole of schooling is amazingly effective. Max.
Just checking, is that you in the mascot suit there, Ken? Is that...
I have spent some time in that mascot suit, actually.
Bring back memories.
That's not actually me in that one, but yes, so my graduate engineer hazing, I think it was, spent some time in the mascot suit. The thing when we get to the young drivers, it becomes a very interesting time in what we know works in terms of education. And what we know works, right, is the hours on the road, the public road environment, driving, building an understanding of the basic control of the vehicle, the way that the risks present themselves on the road network, getting different experiences in different driving conditions. What we know doesn't work, right, are advanced driver training courses. So anything that involves high speed, learning advanced braking, learning to get out of skids, that makes people more likely to be killed or seriously injured. The reason for that is, what happens is the young driver goes in, and gains some more skills. Yeah. And what happens is that they come out of it and then their risk taking goes off the charts because they have a belief that they have better skills. And the reality is that there's only a small number of circumstances where having those skills will save them from a crash, but a whole lot more where they do. This is one of the best sort of studied things around the world in road safety. There's great evidence, but still the sort of natural reaction is to send your young driver to an advanced driver training course. It's kind of, we go, I'm worried for them. I want to give them better skills. And then you send them off to this. They actually come out more likely to be killed or seriously injured. So advanced driver training courses, no. There are driver training courses, defensive style driver training courses, but most of it can be done in the classroom, on the public road environment. I just don't know ways to understand how to not get in risky situations and the like. Nothing needs to be done at high speed. But we know those hours on the road work really, really well. The other thing of interest is that when we try to change behavior through advertising campaigns or these sorts of things, if we target an individual on their behavior, threatening or telling them that they will increase their risk or be involved in a crash, they don't believe us. So take this one, for example. We've got the guy here texting. If we were to say when we say to drivers, don't text and drive because you will be involved in a crash, they go, no. Like that message does not resonate. And the reason for that is, well, the risk of an individual being involved in a crash whilst texting is just minuscule. Now, I don't want you sharing this with the public, right? But there is very, very small risk using a mobile phone will cause a crash that involves death or serious injury. However, we do not operate our system at the individual level, and we need to add up all those tiny risks. And what we see then is a collective risk for society that is big. Mobile phone use and driving is a big issue, right? But at an individual's level, it is not. But what we often do in road safety, and it's not just for mobile phone use, we do it for speed zones all the time. We go, we're reducing the speed limit on this road from 100 kilometers per hour to 80 kilometers per hour for your safety. And they just go, what? I've been driving this for 40 years. It's not for my safety. It's for bloody revenue raising. That's what, guaranteed they'll come back with that. Because again, the chance of them being killed or seriously injured driving 100 or driving 80, the difference is so minuscule for them. But what we're doing is collecting all those risks, and we see a big difference in risk. But if you just shift that off the individual and their behavior and their chance of crash and go to anything else, you're a better chance of gaining traction. Okay? And so this one I love, the TAC's one. It simply says, if you text and drive, your kids are going to text and drive. That is a huge motivator to not text and drive for parents. It's incredible, right? So you're not telling, but kid. I mean, there's interesting research out there to show that communities are far more willing to have speed limit reductions in place for the protection of wildlife than they are for the protection of humans. That's an interesting one. It's slightly off what I'm saying here, but you've got to understand what changes people's behavior. What are they willing to accept? But don't tell people that we're doing it for their safety, their kids' safety, the community safety, the wildlife safety, something else, fuel consumption, anything else rather than their safety. What works? Whole of school approach I talked about. education combined with other partner activities, the police, enforcement and education, and even some infrastructure as a combined effort is really quite powerful. Supporting community education is good. We have an amazingly energized community of road safety volunteers out there. And what our role is to ensure that they are investing their time, their effort, their own money in things that we know are going to work. And it really, we do often see communities investing their own money in sending their, get a small community that decides they're going to send all their young drivers to advanced driver training course, and they'll pay for it, and through all their own hard work. And their heart is so in the right spot, they're actually making their young drivers more likely to be killed or seriously injured. So we need to help them through this. Taking them through the morgue, same thing. I mean, it is not effective in when you say to the young driver, hey, if you don't drive safely, this is what will happen to you, or the trauma ward or something like that. We know that doesn't work. In fact, the data, the research and evidence on that is showing that it affects the drivers who are the least risky and were ever going to take any risk. They are the most traumatized by that and altered. The risk-taking people, they're not affected by it. Interesting. Graduated licensing is really where you release the ability to do things over time. So this is why we have, E-platers can't do certain things, can't drink and drive. They can't have passenger restrictions, sometimes those sorts of things. And targeting especially motivated groups, being parents being the big one. New migrants can often be quite motivated to understand and be involved in this as well. So that's an exciting prospect there. And action programs to change the way the road user uses the network. I'll talk a little bit about more of that stuff later. What doesn't work? I've covered a few of these, I think. Well, fear tactics are really not effective in changing behaviour. They have a purpose in road safety, but this is, shock and awe style advertising, scare the hell out of the public, graphic, really confronting crashes and things like that. They don't change behaviour. And again, they change behaviour on our absolutely lowest risk drivers and riders and the like. Where they serve a purpose is for legislative change and gathering momentum for legislative change. If you want to put in a more stricter drink driving laws or lower speed limits or the like, you can get more ability politically to do that, or community support for it, by blanketing the advertising airwaves with some fear campaigns. Skill-based driver training, we talked about, doesn't work. It goes the other way. One-off events don't tend to work. You want to coordinate your events. And driver simulators, there's not much out there in terms of evidence to show anything meaningful there, although there's a lot of new work happening. So we're sort of monitoring that space to see if something better can come out. Membership in car racing clubs or go-karting clubs, it's a bit the same as skill-based driver training. And just information only. Again, it's a bit like fear tactics, where you can get some justification for your legislative changes, but you don't get actual behaviour change by saying, 10 people have been killed on this road or something like that, or this many people drive from falling asleep at the wheel, so don't drive fatigued. You've got to be more specific than that. This is an interesting little chart. I do like showing this one. This is learner drivers, so they've got a supervising driver, and this is the number of crashes involving learner drivers over a time period. As soon as they get their P-plate, so this is when they don't have to have a supervising driver, the crashes just skyrocket. And then they come down over time. And interestingly, if you do it by raw numbers, but also if you do it by vehicle kilometres travelled, even your sort of 8-year plus drivers are not as safe as a learner driver. So anybody who tells you that it's all about better driver skills, just show them this graph and show them that graduated licensing research. It's not about the skills. It's about a whole lot of other complex factors associated with driving. Okay. Encouragement. Encouragement's an interesting one, and incentivizing campaigns and programs can work. So, I mean, boiling this down simply, we can just pay people to drive safely, and they seem to. It seems to have a bit of an effect. I mean, obviously, you don't just sort of hand them cash, but some of the ones that have worked, yeah, if you go through your probationary periods with no demerit points, you get a free full license. That seems to be quite effective in changing a portion of young driver behaviour. Advertising and marketing a specific behaviour as part of a coordinated effort. So instead of saying, yeah, don't drive fatigued, we say, take a break every 2 hours, a very specific behaviour, rather than, you know, that generalist approach, drive safely and things. You know, what does that mean? How do you know, what's the strategy for it? Recall may lead to action, but it's very hard to understand, are we getting road safety benefit out of advertising campaigns? What we do know is comedy is quite effective on our most highest risk drivers, being young males. They resonate with it, they remember it. Does it lead to action is harder to tell, but sometimes there's been some studies to show that there have been some effect. And I think on your memory sticking in Schoology, I put a few sort of, some of my favorite road safety ads with a comedy element to them, just for a little sort of fun watching, but also to see that in action. Yeah, we're trying to sort of change the culture around road safety as well, from that, you know, it's all the extreme driver behavior challenge to it's real world people being involved in this trauma, and we need to change this system completely. And so we're trying to change that system. And so you're going to see more and more sort of communication with the community around some things that align better with the principles of the SAFE system. And some of you know this ad quite well, but there's one, you know, we're talking to people now about others making mistakes, not you're going to make a mistake. So, yeah, but others are making mistakes. So maybe we need to change our behavior to cater for others. That's just, again, more effective than because you're going to make a mistake or the like. Talking to the community about human tolerance to physical force is a very hard sort of thing to explain. The TAC sort of won many awards with Graham. Graham is a life-size sculpture that looks scarily like a human, but he's the only person designed to survive on our roads with the forces that could be encountered. So it's a life-size sculpture. You can walk around. It's actually sort of targeted around that high school age kid to start to seed a cultural change of questioning some of the ways we manage energy in our road environment. So we did some work with TAC to create the content for, I think it was year 11 physics students, where they actually redesign the road network, and Graham, a digital Graham, this one is, changes back more and more human-like as you alter the road environment by putting a central barrier system in, or putting a roundabout at an intersection, or you know, in urban settings having lower speed limits, or raised safety platforms, and these sorts of interventions. So you can see there that it's sort of, you're starting to, it's playing the long game, but you're starting to instill a culture of altering the way people think about the road environment. Enforcement's really important and continues to be important, but it is just sort of like this underpinning of the system. It's not, it's not, by getting our enforcement right, we're not gonna fix the system. We want to be strategic with our enforcement effort just due to the sheer cost of it often, but we know that we can use the levers of specific or general deterrence. Basically, specific deterrence is if you have been caught doing something, or you've been caught, got a red light fine at a certain intersection, you won't do that again at that one. There's the idea of specific deterrence. General deterrence is more that you could be caught anywhere, anytime, under the rules you know about. And visual presence is actually quite an effective general deterrence feature. And we know it's probably one of the biggest tools we have for instantaneous alterations in road trauma. We know that there's sort of the natural fluctuations in the number of deaths we're going to get. Serious injury has less fluctuations because numbers are bigger. But we're going to bounce around on number of deaths as we go down, and it can. The one thing that we know gets quite a bit of a shift in that immediately is visual presence and enforcement. So it's something that we need to continue to enhance. But automation of enforcement obviously is a much cheaper way to do it, and that's good. And we know speed cameras work. We know red light cameras work. We know. Point-to-point speed cameras are very effective and certainly give us the ability to enforce over long distances without people slow down at the camera and then they speed up. And so point-to-point simply takes a photograph of your number plate at point A and then 10 kilometers down the road or something, or whatever distance you want, takes another photo, works out the speed you are traveling on average, and finds you if you've gone over the speed limit. And very effective, and every jurisdiction does that for heavy vehicles and passenger vehicles, except for New South Wales, who only does it for heavy vehicles for some unknown reason. They have the most point-to-points by a long way, but I don't only use it for heavy vehicles. Interesting sort of incentivizing campaign here. The Swedes, and I love this one, tried what they called Speed Lotto, which was to utilize their point-to-point speed cameras and fine everybody that went above the speed limit. But anybody who went below the speed limit went into the draw to win all the money of the speeders, because they already had everybody's number plate and details, and so they went into a draw and won big sums of money, and immediately just squashed any idea of revenue raising and got excellent compliance as a result. I love it. What great example of an incentivizing campaign. But we've got technology out there that can do wonderful enforcement in much more sophisticated ways than some of the blunt enforcement that we have been doing. Alcohol interlocks, to me, wonderful enforcement technique where if you had a recidivist drink driver, somebody just keeps doing it, or and you put an alcohol interlock into their vehicle, is a far more socially conscious way of enforcing than to do things like whopping great fines, impounding their vehicle, crushing their vehicle. All you do with those other ones, taking their license off them and these sort of things, all you do with those is to spiral their life further out of control, usually. There's often social issues associated with their behavior. You give them big fines, they will never be able to pay that, or they just never will. You have other issues then associated with that. You take their car off them. That was the only way they could get to their work. That was the only way they could get to their kids and pick their kids up or see their kid, whatever it was. So if we can just target the specific behaviors, it's a beautifully socially conscious way to enforce and remove that risk out of the driving task. People drive the way they live is a statement that sort of came out at one point. It's pretty accurate. There's certainly societal challenges, and we may need to look beyond just the road environment and the elements of the safe system to address some behavior on the roads and ways that people use the roads. But we do have techniques like this. There is nothing stopping us doing this with speed as well. Speed interlocks, it's a no-brainer in my mind. I mean, we know we've GIS mapped all the speed zones. We know where people are in their vehicles. The devices have been around, but the technology is not our issue. Like, this is my VicRoads car, like 16 years ago, and I've got a intelligent speed assist device that beeps at me if I'm over the speed limit, and it could control the vehicle if we'd set it up that way. But it's just the political will to do that. Speeding is not yet seen as socially unacceptable in the way that drink driving is, and that probably just needs to change. I would, start it off with high-level speed offenders. People, the high speeders, people are not very accepting of those. Some cool little non-sort of enforcement things, like the different keys. You can give a key to your kid that sets the car so it's got maximum speeds and traction control, and you can set the stereo limits and the like. So vehicle technology, and there's pretty cool stuff happening in those spaces. And the vehicles themselves, pretty exciting. I'll jump through this pretty quickly. I mean, we're seeing wonderful advances in vehicle technology, safety features. We've got, great airbags and the like, but the limitations certainly are there. This is this frontal offset crash for to get 5 stars. That crash only happens at 64 kilometers an hour. And if the dummy doesn't get a high level serious injury, it gets 5 stars, 64 kilometers an hour. Right? Side impact on a pole test, I mean, that one's even less. That one's at 32 kilometers an hour. So, we're pretty far from the speeds we travel on the road environment where there's trees and power poles next to us, and there's a chance of sort of losing control, side impacting that. 32 kilometers an hour is pretty slow. Pedestrians are now tested to get, that's part of getting 5 stars for a vehicle, pedestrian test, and that happens at 40 actually, interestingly. But the question is, when do we get this vehicle? This what I call a level 4 or a level 5 autonomous vehicle. It has no steering wheel. A level 4 autonomous vehicle is sort of geo-fenced. It can only go on certain roads or certain areas. A level 5 is go anywhere and it'll drive itself. We're nowhere near level 5. We've got a few little level 4s puttering around at 10 kilometers an hour. But when is it? It's a long way off. It's a long way off. And then there's a whole lot of murky challenges in how this actually happens over time. We know we've got levels of autonomy. There's bits of autonomy in lots of vehicles already, and there's more coming out. How do they interface? There's something like 2,800 bits of legislation that say you actually can't have this vehicle. So we're going to work through each of those and weed them out. In a safe system assessment, though, we'd start to do a little bit of this thinking and start to say, well, how is this new bit of road that you're building going to be seen and read by the vehicle of the future? Is there any insights? Does it have good communication systems? Are the lines and the signs going to be readable? I mean, most of the cars still are reading signs rather than sort of pre-programmed. They'll use programming as a backup in what they've seen before or what another vehicle has told them is going to be coming, things like that, but they're still reading the road. So we do this bit of thinking, and I think that'll build over time. Currently, it's usually a small bit of a safe system assessment, a little bit of scratching of the head, but it'll build over time. And we know these vehicles will get better and better. And we're having auto emergency braking coming through, and it's doing a wonderful job. And vehicles are, braking before an incident and stopping the incident happen. But sometimes when it does happen still, like this little one there where the leg came off, that vehicle braked heavily beforehand. So it did hit the dummy, but just at low speed. And that's great. We have a big win there. And that's because of speed. And this leads me in, and I'm just going to quickly, at speed, go through speed and give Max a second, hopefully, to just tell you where things are in Moodle. But speed, a few key points. It is so important in the safe system. Okay, here's a few reasons why. Let's have a look at you're going at 60 kilometers per hour, a vehicle is going at 60 kilometers per hour, and there is somebody steps out at 45 meters away. Driver needs reaction time, and that's the green, and then hits the brakes, and then the braking happens and they touch it. They touch the person, just touch the person, maybe like that little dummy leg thing at 45 meters. Let's just go up 10 kilometers. All right. You see there that they hit at 46 kilometers per hour, same distance. Right? It is not linear. It's not a linear relationship. Okay. In fact, when you include the severity of injury into those graphs, we find a power relationship between fatal, and it's a fourth power relationship between fatal and speed change, and it's a third power relationship between serious injury and speed change. Now, if you're not somebody who does power relationships or understands or uses those, basically what it's saying is that small changes in speed have big impacts on the number of people killed and big impacts on the number of people seriously injured, but a little less than the number of people killed. The bigger the impact is for the higher the severity of crash. So when we can get small reductions in speed, you know, you knock 3 kilometers per hour off the speed or something like that, you actually see really quite big benefits in the reduction in fatalities and serious injuries. Other injuries actually sits in at a second power relationship. But we need a lot of work to convince the public that speed, and especially speed limits, are something that has an impact on road safety. There's some stuff there in the notes you can have a look at, but a lot of the public just do not believe speed limits influence the number of crashes. They're a bit more convinced on speed limits and the severity of crashes, so maybe some understanding of basic physics, but still a portion of them don't believe that. Maybe I'll give them credit that they were saying, well, speed limits, people might not follow those speed limits, so maybe that was their justification. But really, this is something I popped into the Austrade's Guide to Road Safety Part 3, Speed and Speed Management, which we just recently updated. And it's a Swedish diagram, but it just says we can have a safe transport system, right? With whatever vehicles, whatever roads, and whatever road users, as long as you filter it through the right speed. But the thing is that we are operating a transport system where we need to move people and goods. And it's not about having everybody traveling at 10 kilometers an hour everywhere, right? No, we need to just operate our system and change our system in a way that it can have speed on the roads we want speed, but that can be done safely, and maybe we'll lower speeds in other areas. And we can do this through speed limits or infrastructure and/or infrastructure. And explaining why a speed limit is in place can be very beneficial in the compliance. And protection of vulnerable road users is quite effective in terms of helping people be okay with a red circle around a black number. And being a bit more creative, crafty or specific with when we reduce speeds can be good. And variable speed limits, I think, are going to just continue to grow over time, and we'll see targeting of speed limit reductions at specific points in time. Anyway, I'll very briefly run through this. Max, you're probably going to not get much time here, but risk is likelihood times consequence. That's the general international definition of risk. It's financial risk, that's health risk. It's what is the chance that a bad thing is going to happen? And then how bad is it actually going to be? What's the magnitude of badness? In a safe system assessment, we take out likelihood into exposure. So how many people are exposed to this bad thing? Then what's the chance that the bad thing's going to happen? And then how bad is it going to be? So how many vehicles are passing through this intersection? What's the chance of vehicle crash? And then what's the severity of the crash going to be? And so we can alter exposure through closing intersections off, and I'm going to go into this in more detail. We close intersections off so nobody is exposed to that. This is closing a level crossing off with a mounded dirt. Or we can separate completely, separate them away. The bike riders here are not exposed to the vehicle crashes because there's no vehicles there. The likelihood is what we've been doing for many, many years. The signs, the line marking, the RRPMs, the shoulder sealing, all of this stuff is reducing the likelihood of crash. The traffic signals, reducing the likelihood of crash. The severity comes into play when we reduce the speed, change the angle, increase the protection. Lowering speeds through an intersection, through the conflict points, reduces the severity of crash. A barrier system reduces the severity of the crash. You run your energy along the system rather than hitting a tree or a culvert. We're going to delve into exposure, likelihood, and severity in huge detail over the rest of the modules. But I'll clip it to Max quickly in 2 minutes to show you the quiz that you've got to do in Moodle, hopefully.
Thank you very much, Ken. So I've just got to share my screen. Hopefully everyone has got access to Moodle, which, as I alluded to at the start of the webinar, is our learning management system. So this is where all the resources are. All the webinars will be uploaded here. There's some references and documents and resources saved in that folder, which are really useful as part of this course. So feel free to click on there, download those files. Module 1 videos, you can have a flick through there. I uploaded the Mythbuster episode that Ken touched on before. So that's something you can watch over your lunch break and claim it's for work. So make the most of that. For the Module 1 quiz, if you just click on that, and that will take you into an area where you can just I'm in a little bit of a different view. I'm in an administration view, but you'll be able to just click on start the quiz. And as Ken mentioned, you'll have 3 chances to get that 80% pass mark. But if you are struggling with any of the questions, you're able to flag those or just send myself an email, and I'm happy to chat one-on-one to make sure that, that everything's understood there. I won't jump into too much more of Moodle. I might just set it there, but let me know if you're having any issues with Moodle.
Yeah, so there was a question that came in around concentration and speed limits, higher speed limits, more concentration. That's an absolute myth. Like, that's been proven. You might get it for a tiny little bit. It's washed out very quickly. And we have 8 common speed myths like that one that we busted with the actual evidence and research, and that's on our website. So maybe Max will just put a link into the resources as well, with just a link to those 8 myths around, like the autobahns are, safe, and they're not at all. And that one, fewer, less time, fewer crashes, and these sorts of things. So we'll pop those up just to cover off a few of those. Thanks, everybody. That's just ticked on time. Get into that quiz. If you log in a little bit early before next session, your chance to win a prize. We'll just do some general trivia, so you can win some prizes before we even start. Thanks, Max.
Good stuff. Have a good day, guys. Thanks very much. Bye.